No.
Trailers.
Deadpool,
Yeah.
Suicide Squad, Walking Dead. Oh,
I'm so excited for Deadpool. I hope Ryan Reynolds doesn't ruin it though,
He-
which is very possible.
Online
He's-
class,
I
you
hope
can
he breaks
upload
the
this
fourth
discussion.
I hope he breaks the fourth wall and just looks right at the audience.
Yeah.
Okay. For the world history class, the setup is a little different than it is for the U.S. and under their lessons. So this is going to be posted up for the U.S. history as well as the world. Obviously, we're world here, and y'all the only traditional class, so that's what everybody's going to get this semester. The format, the advice is the same, whether it's U.S. history, world history, any other type of history that we would teach. Basically, you're going to have the primary documents. The way you approach reading them is going to be the same. The way you approach these multiple choice questions is also going to be the same. Right? For the world history, we have the primary document assignment with the two entries in there. One is the document itself. The other is the assessment. First thing I'm going to do is open up the document, take a look at it. The final exam, you're going to have the document packet in advance. That's essentially going to be your study guide. And the way to use this is, let's say this was the first entry in the document packet. You probably, depends on how long the documents are and how many questions go with each one. So you may see 5 documents in it. You may see, I don't know, about 8 documents. Haven't had one that's gone with more than that. Some of the documents could be a couple pages. Some of them could be very brief, like this one you see is essentially 1 paragraph. Okay. But first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to review materials that go with the document. And the reason I say that is we're going to have 3 different types of questions that you are going to encounter on the final exam. It's all going to be multiple choice, but they're still going to test 3 different things. The first type, you don't need to study at all, because basically it's just reading comprehension. It's going to be a multiple choice question that asks you something about what the document actually says. Right, so the answer is going to be right in front of you if you have the document. If you haven't studied anything, you don't know anything, you should be able to figure the answer out. Don't assume I'm going to make it easy, though. I will not use the wording that they use in the document. You will have to actually understand what it's saying. Most people, that's not the type of question that's going to give them a problem, though, because it essentially is. It doesn't require anything except reading ability. We're in college, so I don't read. The second type asks you to make a logical inference or deduction. You're going to have some facts in the document, and you're going to have a question that asks you to make some kind of reasonable, logical assumption based on the fact in the document. And that's essentially what you do if you're writing your essays. But you're taking a set of facts, and let me rephrase that, that's what you should be doing, because you have that category called analysis, right? And if you remember, you have another category, supportive information, that includes your facts, or you've got facts in the document. You have to analyze it and draw some kind of conclusion. And more or less, that's what history is mostly about. You have all these, primary records, and historians who write books and whatever. That's essentially what they're doing. If you do a research paper, that's essentially what you're doing. When you do the essay, that's what you should be doing here. Write a paragraph, you're making some logical conclusion that you draw from the facts that are available to you, etc.
When we have our packet and we come in for the final exam, are we going to be able to, like, if it's on my laptop, can I use,
Yes.
and can I make notes underneath it?
Yes, and I'll get into that in just a little bit after we go through the question forms. Right. The last type of question requires that you match up some piece of information in the document to information that you're supposed to know from the textbook, the lecture, or anything else that we've done in class. For this class, we had a couple of other PowerPoints from the Roman Republic. We had another one that we looked at on feudalism. You might see something on one of these documents that might relate back to that, but if you know the stuff in the textbook, you're going to be fine. And the classic example of that actually fits more with the U.S. history class, but for example, maybe gives a speech that somebody, either a politician or someone supporting a politician, wrote down, and it might not say who they're supporting or which political party they're supporting, but typically, just like in modern times, if you got a speech, you could read it, you could probably figure out whether this guy leaned towards a Republican or a Democratic party. So you might get that speech, and based on what the person is saying is, you know, the best course of action, a classic question of the type where you have to know stuff in the book is, based on what the person's saying in this speech, which political party do they probably belong to? And for the midterm, you'll have the document packet, the full document packet. It'll all be in one file, so you'll have a Word or a PDF like this, and you'll have however many documents are going to be on the midterm. Will all be in that one file. As you mentioned, you can print that off and bring it to the final exam, or you can come in here and you can bring it up on the computer screen. Okay. You can make notes on the pages. Right? If it's a printed copy, you can use a highlighter and you can make margin notes. If you are using a computer file, same thing. You can actually, as you know, hopefully highlight. And you can also, if you go to the review, that's where how to put the comments in on your essays on the sides. You can use those review boxes, put in margin notes. Don't get carried away. You can't write notes on the back, and I would have a problem if you put so many notes on the margin here that this document, just one little paragraph, ended up being like a 5-page document. It was all notes on the side. So a reasonable amount of notes, essentially margin notes. And you can bring those on a flash drive if you've marked them up and pop them in. You can email it to yourself and download it before the exam. You start the exam. It does not matter which you use, because essentially these systems are set up so I can see what documents you have on there anyway. Those will be the only sources you can use. So it will be no Wikipedia, Encyclopedia Britannica, no jumping off to other websites. I'm debating, I think I will let y'all bring your textbooks in for it and use the textbook. And I'll give you a firm answer on that by Monday of next week. I usually don't, but y'all's time is so compressed for summer. I think y'all probably need a little advantage over what you get if you're taking the full, 15 weeks. All right. Again, as you can see, a very short document. Don't assume because a document's short that there's not a lot that's in there. When I was teaching African American history at the last college I was on faculty with, I taught African American history, and we had one document that was about a 5-line poem. Probably the longest line was 5 words. And it, document packet for that exam had one that was like 3 pages long, single space, dense. It was all speech. The one with the most number of questions on that exam was that short 5-line poem. It related to a lot of stuff from the textbooks, so it generated a lot of questions off of it. Okay. Once this is all posted, this should make your life a little easier when it comes time to review, right? Because you have to know stuff from the textbook, you have to go back and study. But don't assume that you can come in, oh, I got the documents, I'm just going to bring those and I'll be fine. I had a lot of people who've done that. want to take a guess about what their average is on the final?
Bad.
You want to guess how bad?
20.
You're getting right in the range, yeah. Yeah, so I think the average is somewhere around 30% for people who don't do anything except print off the document and say, hey, I'm going to read this stuff and it's all going to be right there. I'm telling you right here, that's not the way it is. So I'm hoping y'all are listening and don't make that mistake. I'm sure, given the number of students I have and statistically, you know, what's happened in the past, someone's going to do that. And someone's going to be mad because they come up and say, I don't see how I got a 25. And I'm be like, well, if you don't know anything, you're actually kind of lucky you got a 25. Because I have had some who, you know, statistically, that's about what you should get if you don't know anything at all and you guess on everything. You got 1 in 4 chance of getting everything right. Any one question right, statistically should be somewhere around 25. I've had some that scored lower than that. And I think the lowest I've had is like about 13%. So, study.
Yeah.
Please study. I mean, believe it or not, I actually don't like failing students. I prefer for them to pass.
You're not one of those teachers.
Yeah. I mean, I do have some students who, you know, when I gave this lecture, recorded it up here, and I've done the same thing every semester, well, not this lecture, the one on essay writing, I said the first thing an essay's got to be, if you look at the essay writing guide, and we go through that, what's it say? The first thing an essay has to have in it. But no, I mean, sir, just get down to the very basics. If it's an essay, it's got to have,
Intro.
well, you're getting there, it's got to have,
Thesis.
it's got to have
Format.
the format, which is, well, even more basic than that.
Or making this.
5 paragraphs?
5 paragraphs, yes.
Uh,
Yeah, I think the title to the writing guide is the format for the 5-paragraph essay. I've got someone 3 times in a row in my online class who's turned in 3 sentences and gets a 0 each time. And I don't know, you know, you put the feedback in the box and it says, look, you're getting a 0 because you didn't even do an essay. Go back and read the writing guide. Nevertheless, 3 times in a row they turn in the same thing, so they're not reading the feedback or not reading the guides. I think those were assigned week 1. So, what I'm telling you, study the book. Please study the book. All right? This should make your life easier because you're going to have, like, let's say we have 8 documents in there. Let's say one of them is this one, where you know, well, chapter 1, I need to study the stuff on Mesopotamia. So I need to study maybe 5 pages out of chapter 1, maybe 5 pages out of chapter 2 on Assyria. That's all I got to study. I go to the next document, maybe it's something on Greece. It's got a date on it, you know what time period. Oh, this is from classical Greece. This is something related to Athenian democracy. I don't need to study the Hellenistic era. I can actually narrow it down to just a few pages in each chapter. Got 8 documents. You might not have to study more than 24 pages. That makes it a whole lot easier than saying, hey, here's a midterm, go study everything, right?
and they study on like 1 chapter.
Yeah, now,
Crazy.
caveat on that is, since you don't have as much to study, know it thoroughly. I will test it in depth, so know about everything.
So is there a set date for the final?
There is, and it's in the syllabus.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I don't
if
know
was
which date it is
changed.
off.
It's either the 5th or the 6th
Yeah.
of next month.
Oh.
Yeah, it's either 5th or 6th. It's going to be our normal class time.
I
All
think
my
this is-
students, it's those dates, they make an appointment, they can come in anytime during the day. If y'all rather take it at one of those other times, either of those 2 days, you can do that as well. If you feel prepared and you actually want to take it early, last week of class, you can make an appointment and do that, just be done with everything. But make sure you study and thoroughly. All right. Some things about the documents themselves. All right, you notice that you have a document here. This is the entire document right here. This one tells you essentially the title. This one isn't like a book chapter or something, so it's basically just telling you what it is. It's a marriage contract. This was from the editor that put the documents together, translated them, etc. Gives you a little bit of brief information about the document. Don't ignore that. That can be valuable. For one thing, it tells you right here, Old Assyrian, 19th century BC. And it tells you the history of its translation. What's the important part of this?
19th century BC.
Yes, it tells you. It's an Assyrian document from the 19th century BC. You can target your studying to that specific time frame, right? And that particular society. Assyrian culture is essentially a later version of, and carried the same trends as Mesopotamian culture, so you would probably want to read up on all that. Right. Now, as you read through the document, you'll see these numbers. A lot of times that means there's like a, in the original document, which was of course in cuneiform, there were probably breaks in there somewhere. These you'll see in the brackets here, there's a 1, 2, and 3 are footnotes. So this part down here is not part of the document. That's the footnotes. Right? Don't ignore the footnotes, because they have some information in there that can be helpful to you as well. They may explain something that's in the text. Right? This one, that first note has some relationship with one of the questions I asked, actually. And so does the second one. There's questions in the practice quiz that correspond specifically to information that is in those footnotes. Now it is information that you could probably figure out. You could treat it as one of those logical inference questions and should come to the right answer. But why do extra work if the answer's in front of you? So pay attention to everything that's in there. I'm not necessarily going to say that I'm always going to test on what's going to be on the footnotes, but if there's something in the footnotes that may be valuable. Yes.
Approximately how many documents are we going to have in our package for the final exam?
Again, it kind of depends on the documents, how long they are, how much each document covers. You know, you could have a document where you have to read a bigger slice of, say, Greek history than another document. But I would say no more than 8. Okay. If we go back inside that folder, we got a quiz. All right. I know you can't wait to get into it, and you don't want me to give the answers away and spoil your self-assessment. But when you approach these and read the questions, right, there are a lot of clues in there that can help you also. And this is true for probably just about every kind of multiple choice test that you take. I'm sure if you came through the public school system in recent years, they probably spent almost as much time on test-taking strategies as they did on the content you're supposed to learn.
More so.
Or more so. Unless you're in the land, I guess they just give you the answers. I won't do that, by the way.
Horrible.
When I was teaching high school, I taught the AP test and gave all the tests were old AP questions, multiple choice, and students actually asked me for answers. I always did respond to them, but I always gave them the wrong answers. And they picked up on it about the third test. But I figured, wait a minute, every time he gives me an answer, it comes back marked wrong. He's giving me the wrong answers.
That's messed up.
Well, basically that would be cheating, right? So why should I give you the right answer? Give you credit for it. But, when you break down these, there are going to be some clues. Right? The social status of the Eridul is least likely. The Eridul is a term that is defined in the document, so you would go there and look for that definition. Essentially, it was a slave woman who was bought for the purpose of having the husband's children. Like, again, I think we talked about the early Jewish culture, Abraham, and how his wife thought she was too old to have kids, so she said, here's a slave girl, go get her pregnant. And essentially, that's one of the reasons people think that the Jewish, the Hebrew people originated from Sumer, because they displayed some of those cultural norms that were relevant back then. So,
I'm reading the thing, and it doesn't sound like a Herodul is the slave woman. Because it says he may not marry another woman, but in the city he may marry a Herodul. Sounds more like Herodul's like a mistress, a different woman.
oh, you know what, you're actually right, and very good call. I think you mentioned the slave woman by the term slave woman.
Yeah,
didn't you?
because
Yes.
then it says if within 2 years she does not provide him with offspring, she herself will purchase a slave woman.
And yes, I'm sorry, it's been about 2 years since I've used this document, so I kind of forgotten that myself. But you're absolutely right, and also if you go down, you'll see that that sentence ends with the one, and if you go down to the first note,
Mhm.
it explains that according to Assyrian law, she'd be a free citizen, but would have an inferior status.
To that of the first one.
Which, of course, unfortunately gives you the answer to the first one. So I just broke my promise that I wouldn't have to give you any answers there. But,
Oh, darn.
Everybody
Yeah.
on his computer.
Yeah.
That does show the value of reading those footnotes, though. 'Cause
I
that's
didn't
where
read
that
the
answer
footnotes, I read it
would come
from
from.
the book.
Okay.
Yep, cheap.
Okay. That phrase at the end, least likely, you might see most likely, maybe just likely. Anything that's kind of somewhat nebulous, if the room leaves some room for a different answer, you know, what's logically going to happen? Well, if something's logically going to happen, it doesn't necessarily happen that way, right? So that means there's not enough information for it to be an absolute positive answer. And what that means is, this is most likely one of those where you have to make a logical deduction. Because if you make a logical deduction, like I say, things that are logical don't necessarily turn out to be the things that follow, right? In this case, you could also get it through reading the footnote. So that one is in there, but if you skip the footnote, it'd be kind of logical. What would you think the stats would be of a second wife? Equal to, less than?
It depends on where you
It may depend, but I felt comfortable putting it in there because it did have the footnote. This one, also a logical inference. You'll look at this and you see the phrase most likely, and then you'll see the choices. Read through each of those. I'm sure they tell you that when they go through test taking strategies in public schools or whatever. But read through each answer choice, even though you may know the answer, especially on one where it's most likely, least likely, something like that. And decide which one is actually the most likely. Because you have two things that sound good, two things that could logically come from the same core set of facts. But which one is the most likely to happen? Let's see, the marriage contract would most likely reflect that marriage was more of a romantic institution in Sumer. Do you get that from it? Not at all, right? Differ greatly than the Assyrians, since women had more legal rights in Sumer. Well, we read the book, we know they didn't have legal rights through most of the history. Would be less detailed or harder to enforce, since Sumer did not develop writing. You know, that's a basic one, we know. Of course it did. Be similar, since the Assyrians shared a similar culture with other Mesopotamian civilizations. Good, I see everybody's getting to that one, so that's good. All right. This one you actually are making a logical inference, and as you see from the answer choices, you have to know a little bit of something from the textbook as well. You could probably logically, without knowledge of Sumer, just looking at this, figure out from everything we've done, how much was romance and love and all that a part of marriage in any culture we've looked at thus far, up through the Middle Ages? Yeah, forget that stuff, right? Talking about women's rights, and we pretty much know every culture women's rights were somewhat limited. Some had more rights in one culture than others, but still we know it's pretty limited. All right. Number 3, the Eridul would only be married if Hatala could not produce children, would rank lower in the household than would Hatala, would serve primarily as household labor, would rank higher within the household upon her marriage.
B.
We can basically look at this one as basically the same as the first question, just reworded a little bit. The trick to that one was this one was put in there to make sure you weren't confusing the Eridul with the slave one. Because if you just read through it, saw you got this slave one, you can marry this woman if he has kids, you might say, okay, well, we're talking about the same thing. The Eridul and the slave woman, 2 distinct offices.
So basically, reading through this, it says, but in the city, does it? It says, i.e. assured, is that the city?
That was the city.
Okay. So as long as they're within that city, he can be married, he can marry the Herodul.
That's the way it's taken, yeah. Sounds weird to us, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
I guess it's kind of like in the military, they used to have like a 300-mile rule. They still talk about that at all? You get deployed more than 300 miles from home, it's like Vegas, whatever happens, stays there.
whatever happens on cruise station.
Now they call it different zip codes.
Well, that could be like right across the street in some cases.
Yeah.
But essentially, yeah, I mean, their system, I guess you could have a wife in multiple cities. That means, might give you, again, if you use some inference, it might tell you what this person was. Because if the person was a farmer, they're probably not going to be traveling to different cities periodically. It sounds like it might have been someone who was, again, using logic, might have been involved in trade, somebody who would have a reason for going and spending a lot of time in other cities, where he would then have a wife in more than one city.
But it
Perhaps.
doesn't say in more than one city, it just says.
Yeah, it just
in
says the one.
City.
Which, who knows, may mean he has a trading office or a store in that city. Maybe he doesn't have one in others. He might specialize in trade between Asher and somewhere. That's all, but it's all hypothetical. Again, it's a logical answer. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It could be military too.
Yeah.
Stationed somewhere else, but yeah, he can, maybe he's in a unit that's stationed in Asher a lot of the year or something. Who knows? But there is probably some rule that made sense to them. Spending a lot of time in in 2 places would be the logical conclusion. All right. Let's see, what number was that? The 34. Based on the reading of note 2, what ambiguity of the document is. Basically, this is a reading comprehension. You go read note 2, and it's going to tell you the answer. All right, number 5, based on a reading of the notes. When you see those phrases again, based on the reading, or based on this document, that tells you more than likely it's one of those questions where the answer's right there in front of you. It's in the document somewhere. Yeah, it looks like the same question. It's been a while since I wrote that up. Maybe there's a reason for the difference here. Okay, 6. Which of the following can be reasoned from the text of the document? That pretty much tells you right there which kind of question this is. Is this one where it's going to be right there in the document? It's going to be one where the facts are in the textbook and you got to match them to information in the document? The key word in the question is reason.
It's a comprehension.
Yeah. If you're reasoning something, essentially you're making a deduction or an inference from it. So it tells you in the question here, this is one of those where you gotta make an inference. Right? Based on this document, it is logical to assume, same thing, right? One, we know there's not a firm answer. He was asking you something about the document itself. You'd have to ask it so that there is an absolute answer, because if it's in the document, it's in the document. If it's tied to a fact that's out in the textbook, there might be a little bit of assumption in there. So it could be one of those, but when you see this, it's logical to assume if you're making assumptions, you're essentially, especially logical ones, you're making an inference. You're making a deduction. So that's that type of question, more than likely. And it doesn't tell you in the document, by the way, what marriage's primary purpose was at the time. Does it tell you in the textbook? I think it does, yeah. If you didn't know the stuff from the textbook, you forgot to study, could you deduce the most logical answer here?
Yes,
Yeah.
maybe. Depends on the question.
It may depend on the question.
This question, yeah. I'd
So it
say.
may depend on, this one you do, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
You probably do it in all, it might be a little harder to do it, but you can make that, you can come to that conclusion. The last one, the fact that this contract was written in cuneiform reflects the fact that Assyria was closely related to the people of, and gives you somewhere there, should be easy to figure that out. That does require you to know something from the textbook. Who developed cuneiform? Right? Another little trick to this is the more you know from the textbook, you're not just going to get the ones right that actually require you to know stuff from the textbook. As that one on the marriage, the purpose of marriage would show, if you know from all material in the textbook that relates to the period and the culture in the document, you don't have to make that logical deduction because you probably already know the answer. That one was written for you to make a deduction, and you can obviously make the deduction. But if you've read the textbook and you know it thoroughly, then you know the purpose of marriage in Sumer, Mesopotamia as a whole, was usually to produce children. So, again, study, because if you study, it makes your life easier. You get all the ones, hopefully you get all the ones right where you have to know the stuff in the textbook and match it to information in the document. Usually you can kind of skip the part where you got to sit there and think, oh, I got to think about this. Hey, I know this already anyway. The reading comprehension is the only one. Even there, sometimes if you know the stuff in the textbook, you'll probably know the answer. Right? Because we didn't talk about aradules specifically. We did talk about the use of a slave in producing children when the wife didn't bear them. So there's some stuff here that might get you to the answers, whether you read the documents or not, in some of the questions. Others, the document has something a little bit more detailed in the book, and so you do have to go to the document for that answer. But the more you know the stuff in the textbook, just in general, the better you're going to be. And now when we get the document packet posted up, we're also going to go through each of the documents. That's basically going to be our review for the final. We're going to go through the documents and help guide you to the parts in the textbook that you should study for the final exam. Right? And hopefully that shouldn't be too difficult. Now, with that said, people do, for some reason, struggle with these. Maybe because it's not the type of test they're used to taking. Requires a little bit of difference in the thinking process from what they're used to, or whatever. Most people don't do well the first time or two that they take these practice quizzes. So don't be surprised if you end up with like 40% the first time. On Thursday, we're going to go back over, going to look at the results from this class and go through each question, kind of see where people were struggling and kind of give some more in-depth pointers to what you're probably doing. This was pretty easy, so I imagine you probably do better.
Well, it's just going to be between
But when we get to about the third time we're practicing this, should probably start clicking, and you'll see a big jump. And of course, it depends on how much you focus on it and try to master this as well. I've had some people who, like I said, most common thing is they don't study, they come in on the final, get a 30% because they were saying, I got the documents, I'm going to read them, I'm going to be fine. It doesn't work that way. Have some who come in and for some reason it just doesn't click, right? They don't reason the same way, I guess, as what's logical to them, not necessarily logical to me when I put the quiz together. Right? But most of the time, once you get to about the third practice, you should start seeing a big jump in what you do on there. The exception is this one's so easy, you probably do fine on it anyway. Or you had somebody giving you half the correct answers anyway. The biggest problem people have besides the just not studying is when you read the documents, read them slowly and make sure you understand them word for word. Yet my career before here was I was a lawyer. And so when I write the questions up, I kind of break down the questions very precisely based on their language, just like I would if I was writing or reading a contract. So it will be very precise when you match the question to the language. And that's the second biggest thing. People read through the documents very quickly and don't exactly interpret the sentence here or there correctly. Even sometimes when it's pretty obvious what it's saying. So read the document slowly. You've heard your classmate already give you some advice through the question he asked. Because one of the things I always do advise is what he asked the question about. Get the documents, print them up, or take the e-file. It doesn't matter to me which one. But use your highlighter and use your margin notes. Make sure that you've broken down if there's unclear sections in there. Take it very slowly, word for word, until you can, pretty sure you grasp the meaning of that sentence. Make a margin note so you don't forget it. If you have the computer, you know, you can change up the color of the highlighting up there at the toolbar. And of course, if you've got a physical copy, you can use multiple colors of highlighters. You might want to say, okay, if I got a problem with something in the text, this is one that I don't understand the meaning, or the meaning is not plain to me, I highlight that in orange. I've got something here that relates to a fact in the book, I highlight that in yellow, and then I make my margin note. That way I know this part, it's yellow, so it has something to do with the textbook. This part is orange, so it has something to do with the language that they use. I needed to make a note of. The more thorough you are with the reading, the better off you're going to be as well. And on top of that, the other thing that gives students some issues, and this is what I hate to see, is that they read the document and they assume it means something, and get this meaning of a sentence completely wrong because they didn't know the definition of one of the words in there that was used in that document. You get the documents in advance and you don't know the meaning of a particular word. What options available to you at this point? Look it up, yeah. Look it up. Dictionary. You got a physical dictionary and you got those online now too. So if you don't know the meaning of a word, look it up, and if you can't, think you might still forget it, that's one of the notes you can make. Put a margin of this word means, whatever. And again, it all goes down to your ability to understand and then process the information in the documents. If you don't know the meaning of the word, well, your assumption as to what the document is saying is probably, or may be, wrong. And then, like any logical process, whether you talk about math, where you're using a formula, or philosophy, everything is based on certain assumptions, a certain set of core facts. And if those assumptions are incorrect, what does that mean? How, your deduction, your inference is going to be? Or if it's a mathematical formula, if it's, you follow the formula exactly, but you put the wrong number in somewhere, what's going to happen to your answer? That's going to be wrong. Same thing here. You can actually kind of look at this as a mathematical type thing. You got a formula you're following. If you make an assumption, it's incorrect, your conclusion is going to also be incorrect. So, yes, sir.
I just use your advice on the aerial.
Mm-hmm.
It says a slave or prostitute in the service of a temple. That's in ancient Greece.
In ancient Greece? Yeah, it is a Greek word. My guess, and again, this is one,
But
it's a little different because they do give you a definition in the footnotes.
Hmm?
Since they do give you a definition there in the footnotes, that would trump. But if you look that up in the dictionary, it's probably a Greek word, and they're more than likely the person who translated this document was using a Greek word to cover a Mesopotamian word that he couldn't translate into English. So the closest one was his Greek form. And there may be something to it. So we know that the priestesses in Sumer and most Mesopotamian cities, at least some of them, were prostitutes. Maybe there's some relationship in there that's, you know, we're operating on a basic level, so that might go into some more depth. Right. Any other questions? Questions about the quiz, questions about the documents, any of that stuff, anything. Okay, good. Good. All right.
So, the question, like, the assessment questions that you are giving us for practice are gonna look pretty similar to the final exam questions?
They will look pretty similar to those, yes. In fact, I may even be very nice and put one of them, these documents, in there with those questions. Which I guess would be a good bit, well, I guess it depends on how you do on that particular assessment.
So it would be a good idea, like, just to, you know, when we go over them in class,
Mhm.
you'll kind of guide us where we should be
Yes.
studying. Okay.
Oh, and the other thing I should mention, I am going to go back and limit the attempts on this quiz to just one. Right? I'm going to get one attempt on the final, so if I, give you like 4 attempts, everybody gets 100, then it's not going to let me do a good analysis to see what's going on, where people are struggling. So this one's only going to have 1 attempt, and that way I can pull the statistics. It won't hurt your grade. It's not linked to the grade book or anything like that. And that way, we'll have like an honest assessment. If I said, okay, yeah, we're just going to give you the final today, you know how you would do on it. And Thursday we will go back over the results. So get those done today, tomorrow. I guess you can do it Thursday before 9 o'clock. It is a short document, it's only 8 questions, so pretty easy. And then we'll start getting some more up. And maybe reorganize that, because it'll probably get kind of cluttered if I just keep putting 2 files of document assessment in that one folder. So I might separate all the rest of them into subfolders in there. You can click into primary documents, and then there'll be a folder with the second practice document and assessment in it. Do a third, so on and so on. Online students won't get the advantage of me getting to break down their document results the same way. So what I may do is, I will record the session again on Thursday, but I may bring their documents up as well, their results, and see. They may have different issues than you, so it may not benefit you that much, but I guess ultimately the next document you might make the mistakes they're making, so maybe you could prevent yourself from falling into some future trap. I don't see how it would not be a benefit to see how all the possible ways in which you could be, you know, approaching this incorrectly. So, and it probably shouldn't take long either, not with just 8. The U.S. won't benefit you though, I guess. So. There is a value to that. Well, I think we might look at one of theirs too. There is a value to it though. All right, that's it. No other questions?